As I mentioned in another video, I have been totally Bylered. How? This image right here. What? I was so sympathetic with Will and his coming out journey and being in love with your best friend. I've been there. I've fallen in love with people that didn't love me back or couldn't express that they loved me. Or maybe didn't. Maybe it was just a crush. Whatever. But this? Are you kidding me? Look at that. So I recorded a 40-minute Byler video and lost the whole thing because my phone died and my heart is totally broken. I am going to try to read my notes that I never wrote a full script, but I did have notes. I meandered so many different places, I'll never get it all back, and I am bugged. I can't believe that I didn't realize my phone was that close to dying. So I think first I'm going to talk a little bit about my credentials because I am recognizing a pattern in the Byler versus the general Stranger Things Reddit. It reminds me deeply debating idiots about politics online since 2016, 2015, and during the Floyd protests. And even still, they bring up George Floyd and think George Floyd was the hero of liberals. No, he shouldn't have been murdered for, at best, a petty crime is what he was accused of. I don't care if someone commits a petty crime. We don't murder people. We have due process and a criminal justice system. I just want to talk a bit about my background. It's academic. I'm not saying I'm an expert because I've never successfully transitioned to a job in my intended fields. I've never finished and published any of my work. However, I do have a bachelor's degree. The first bachelor's degree is actually in political science and women's studies, which taught me, lenses to analyze media and just critical thinking skills. I also didn't finish, but I went to San Francisco State for journalism school, and I remember very vividly taking a class in analytical journalism, and one of the things that I remember about that is how data can be used in a way that is untruthful. Like saying that something is something's up 50%, and it's still, let's say it's up 100%, but there was only one person out of 100 that thing happened to. So it's not as catastrophic as it sounds. In journalism, again, you have to meet a lot of people. You have to interview people. You have to know what questions to ask them. You have to know a lot about history and politics and different things because your first job is probably going to be going to city council meetings and things like that. So you just have to know a little bit of everything. In my second BA, I went back to school in my 30s. I started at NYU, go Violets, and lost funding and somehow got into Columbia and got funding and finished my second BA. When I got the first one, when it looked like I wasn't going to have funding to finish the Columbia BA, transferred classes back, got the first one from Cal State Fullerton by transferring back a couple classes from NYU. I also did manage to finish it, and that degree is in literature and creative writing. I come to any media with creative writing and journalism and political science and women's studies lenses, and also just knowing as a writer how difficult it is to write the blank page. It is terrifying. And to have people say that things aren't intentional, I know how difficult it is to write and to come up with characters, and even if they're based on yourself, it still needs more. You have to include symbolism and things. I'll give an example from my life. I wrote a story. I lived in hotels for women when I lived in New York, and they were really fastidious about us not taking food out, although we were allowed to have quite a lot of food, but it was more food than I could eat in a sitting. It's like a half a plate of rice or whatever the carb was, the meat, a vegetable, a couple pieces of bread, there was a bowl of fruit, dessert. And so I just wanted to take my freaking fruit out or take a salad after so I could have that a couple hours later. And they would kind of make a big deal out of it. And so in this story, I had the character, it's a character that's having trouble with dating because it lives in a hotel for women, and men, it's called No Men Above the Lobby because men are only allowed in the dining room and the lobby, but not up in the bedrooms. And I got the idea because I hung out with all these older ladies, and one was a lesbian, and her very butch, girlfriend was always upstairs. And I thought, isn't that funny? Like, that goes against everything they believe in, but at the same time, as a woman and women were allowed upstairs. So that was the inspiration for the story. And I have the character leave the cafeteria, and she puts a banana in her purse, and the people that run at the major that supervises the property gives her a dirty look. And my teacher pointed out that was a sexual innuendo. It was not intended. So that does happen. Then it became intentional. And when I was aware of it, I slipped other bananas into other virtual purses. The whole blue and yellow fact that Mike is constantly looking at Will's lips, that none of this is an accident. Because, if I understand that there's probably people out there that like are girls who have crushes on Finn Wolfhard, or guys who identify with Mike and they don't want him to be gay because they can't handle it. Either Mike is gay or Finn Wolfhard's gay, right? Because he's always looking at Noah's lips. So I think he's probably just a really good actor. In fact, I'm incredibly impressed with him because, I didn't think much, when the show came out about I enjoyed the show, but, I was more interested in the monster stuff and the mystery, right? I definitely didn't care about the dating relationships. I was like, let's get to the monsters. But it was when I saw that final shot, I'm like, what the heck? I had to rewatch the show. Now, I haven't done a rewatch in a long time. After Game of Thrones and Lost, a few others, I felt I got burned, and I had to a show in that way. After that, those shots of Mike, and I think maybe the flirting scene in the field, I was like, whoa, because I just thought it was one-sided and it was Will. So I basically, on my rewatch, saw so much. Oh, I forgot a degree. Actually, I think I forgot a couple degrees. So sidebar, I also have a creative writing MFA degree from Cal Arts. It's critical studies, but my classes were all were all creative writing. And an MFA makes me qualified to teach creative writing, although usually you have to have publications. And I'm about 90% of the way through a screenwriting MFA. I also have another master's in creative writing because I was getting back into writing. And mostly, I've had people make that snide comment of, I always need to be a professional student. There's no such thing as a professional student. I didn't get paid to be a student, so you're just being really shitty. It was really just about having funding, use the time to finish projects. I mean, that's the main point for me of a writing degree. I didn't particularly want to teach, but that was my purpose in getting those degrees. Screenwriting degree in particular, I found difficult. I couldn't get my final project approved. That's why I haven't finished it, because the woman that's the head of the program doesn't really like my work and doesn't understand it. When I write about racism, she thinks that I have that no character's that evil, and I didn't even really have the characters do anything that evil. They're just shitty, which is my experience of white women are often very shitty to me and expect me to obey them, and when I don't, they retaliate. I've lost jobs. I've been forced out of things. So and here she's a white woman telling me my experience isn't realistic or believable. So I really identify with the writers of Stranger Things, because on the one hand there's monsters, but people don't find it believable that Mike could be gay. It's fucking insane. Sometimes the feedback that you get in writing workshops, you have to just believe in your own story at some point. And, I take the advice that's helpful, like what's not clear or what people aren't understanding, or, sometimes it's very good advice, but you also have to know what advice is just totally not for you, right? Because it's coming from that person's perspective. They've either misread or they're putting too much of themselves in it. Anyway, but in addition, like doing screenwriting, I had a professor who's a really good writer and showrunner. He was the showrunner for Cheers and Taxi, so very successful. He's been like I think he's been like a script doctor too, where you fix scripts that are already written. He was really smart and really kind, really encouraging to me. Said that my scripts could be, produced as is, and that was both the spec scripts and my original scripts. So I did a spec script for Blackish, because that's what we were assigned to do that semester, was study Blackish. So you basically watch the whole series or rewatch several episodes to kind of just get the rhythm of the show and their sense of humor and how the characters are. And then I did an original 2 sitcoms and a drama, where you do a whole series for that class. So you come up with the idea for your sitcom, you come up with the characters, you write a show Bible, you write the pilot, and you outline the season. And I think we were doing it as streaming, so we were only doing 8 to 10 episodes. So I've done that, like I said, for 2 sitcoms. I really, really deeply struggled with the drama because a sitcom is episodic. You can come in and watch an episode and just enjoy that episode, and it's self-standing. Whereas obviously with the drama, especially something like Stranger Things, where there's all this intrigue and drama and government stuff and relationship stuff and monsters and sci-fi and references to, there's so much that goes into it. I found that really super difficult. Maybe I could write a drama if I ever got a job in Hollywood and was more experienced, but I have nothing but props for people that can do that, because you have to balance all those different character arcs and the overall arc of the series and each season and where the season's going to end. It has to end where there's a satisfying conclusion to that arc, but also a teaser for the next season. It is not just something someone pulled out of their ear. It drives me crazy to read commentary like, oh, it's an accident. It's an accident that Finn's just always staring at Noah's lips. Yeah, like he's a horrible actor apparently. And it's an accident that Mike's got a sign that's a one-way sign that points to his closet. I grew up in the 80s. There was a rumor that a guy had a one-way sign. Do you know which way it was pointed? According to legend, to his bed. And that brings me to another point that people, I've seen a lot, is that anyone that is rooting for Byler is like a groomer or wants to see, is like sexually turned on by 2 teenagers. No, it's not sexual for me. I want these 2 boys to have the happy ending that any other protagonists would in the same situation. And it is absolutely revolutionary that 2 teenage boys in the 80s in a small town, would find each other and fall in love. And it's a gay story that's wholesome, and it's within a mainstream show, not a show that was marketed as LGBTQ, so that a lot of straight people wouldn't have watched it. I'll be honest, I don't, I'd watch something that's LGBTQ, but I don't specifically seek it. And also the way our algorithms work, it's not going to be served to me, right, either. So if they land this plane, and I think they will based on the acting and the direction and the, the way they deal with lighting and costume and balance, all of these things, it's so deliberate. It could change everything. It could change how what is bought. It could change. Certainly, I see these kids on Reddit, and some of them are teenagers and young adults, and they need this. They need this really badly, especially after what's happened in the last couple of years, and we're reverting to hate and bigotry. But also, it helped me understand the process of coming out. I didn't know anyone who was out until the early 90s. So I grew up in the 80s. I am the same age as the core 4. And maybe people are just not understanding how different it was. I think this could be so healing for, LGBTQ people, not just men, but everyone who grew up in the 80s and before and didn't get to hold their boyfriend's hand or didn't get to have a boyfriend because they couldn't possibly flirt. And, this has helped me understand just how careful you had to be. I mean, I understood that intellectually. Bit out of sequence here, but I moved to San Francisco in 1995. So everyone in San Francisco goes to Pride. It's not just gays. There's straight families there. It was like that 30 years ago. So that was also a big exposure for me to gay culture. And one thing that really struck me about the first time I went to the Pride Parade, besides the fact that the mayor is in it, that's how mainstream it is. And actually, the last time I went to it about 15 years ago, it was really commercialized. AT&T had a float, PG&E, everybody, all the floats were a lot of them were sponsored by big businesses. But anyway, what I was going to say is, one thing that really struck me I was at Pride and I was walking around the city, and San Francisco was the number one tourist destination at the time. And, definitely during Pride, I worked at a hotel and it was always sold out. So people from the Midwest would call to book a vacation. They'd want the last weekend of June or whenever Pride was. And we'd have to tell them that we were sold out. And they're like, what do you mean you're sold out? That's like 3 months from now. We're like, it's Pride. It was sold out a year ago. Anyway, but one thing that really, really struck me is I would see these people who had obviously come from all over the world, and they would hold their boyfriend or girlfriend's hand, and, a gay couple. They would hold their partner's hand. And I saw them physically relax. And I just knew in those moments when I saw this happen several times, that they had that freedom. Maybe they're from another country or a small town or something, and just the joy in their eyes, it was so beautiful. And it's always stuck with me. It's 30 years later, and I don't remember specific people, obviously, but I just remember seeing that same thing play out several times. And, if you love Mike, you want him to be happy, don't you? Like, that's what you should feel for a friend or a family member, regardless. As long as they're not harming someone else, I want them to be happy. Whatever makes them happy. Whoever makes them happy. As long as, they're happy and healthy and not harming anyone else, it's not my business, and it's certainly not for me to judge, and I don't care. But then when people say, well, there's no evidence that Mike is gay, and there's tons of evidence Mike is gay. In fact, Mike is more queer-coded than Will. Watching some theory videos and talking to people who, some are gay and some are not, but the ones that are gay have shared about how this resonates with them, because of how difficult it is to come out, and the process of coming out, the process of realizing, not even just coming out, but just realizing that you're gay and coming to terms with that, when maybe your family is very religious and against it. Maybe you are in a small town. That's still happening today, and then for, people of my generation, I just think it's going to heal some little inner gay boys and girls, my age and older. Certainly my mom's generation even more. I think that this could be one of the most beautiful love stories ever on television between two boys. And I just think that, it wouldn't have occurred to me until I just saw Mike's look, and I didn't realize he was gay, and I was like, oh, it's been there right in front of us all along, and I missed all the signs. Yeah, exactly what happens to gay people, because they have to hide who they are until they feel safe. And in the 80s, they didn't feel safe. I myself cringe at the thought of how I repeated homophobic comments and jokes. And I hate that I wasn't a safe person, for people around me that were gay. There's a couple guys I went to high school with and junior high with that are out, and actually two of them, I think they live pretty close to each other. I should introduce them. They could be friends. They both live in West Hollywood, but it wasn't. I didn't meet anyone out until a few years later in the early 90s. And the first person that I met who was out, I remember specifically, I was 21. I had gone to junior college for 3 years to save money before I moved out of my parents' house and went away. And there was a college fair, a club fair, all the tables set up, and Raja, who won season 3 of RuPaul's Drag Race, went to my college, and I think he was a freshman. He's a couple of years younger than me, and he's signing up at the LGBTQ table, and I was just like, oh my God, that's so brave, because it was Orange County in the 90s, and there were gay characters on TV a little bit more than there had been a few years earlier, but still the gay character was never the lead. It's not like a Will and Grace situation. Gay characters are usually comic relief, usually single, certainly asexual. The irony of gay characters always had to be asexual. There were gay actors that I grew up with, Paul Lynde and Charles Nelson Riley, who were obviously gay, but it was just like a wink and a nudge, because they couldn't say anything, and they certainly didn't talk about their partners in interviews or anything like that. And so, the idea that, there should have been very overt signs or physical, kiss or anything between Mike and Will before. And so therefore, quote unquote, Mike is obviously not gay. And he may be bi, by the way, when there's so many signs that indeed he is definitely queer. And it's all over the set dressing. It is all over in the acting. And again, I'm just like, Finn Wolfhard should get an Emmy. And heck, they're releasing it in the theater. Can he get an Oscar? Because he's been playing this since he was a child. And there's so many just little moments, micro expressions, multiple expressions rippling across his face where there's like attraction, joy, connection, fear, gay panic, like just through his face. He's so young that he's been doing this. I am just like amazed. I remember either when the show first came out or Ghostbusters, and I heard his name and I was like, Finn Wolfhard, that's a hell of a name for a little kid. I hope he grows into that name. And I think he did. It's amazing what they've accomplished. And to have people say, oh, well, there's no sign. Yeah, that's kind of the whole point. There couldn't be a sign, because if he told the wrong person or they can't hold hands, if he said that to Will, he might lose Will forever. And that's what they both are fearing, dum-dums. Like, it's so obvious to me. And, it's like now that I see it, I can't unsee it. And it all makes so much sense. And it's such a beautiful story. I'm so touched, and there's a lot of fear among people that are shipping Byler. I'm not approaching it as someone that was shipping it for years. I'm approaching it as someone who just like woke up and was like, what? And then had to go back and rewatch it, and I'm coming to it as someone, again, with a poli-sci, sociology, gender studies background, and as a writer. And there's just not that much just repeated references, unless it's intentional. So, the two possibilities, and the one that, people are nervous about, is that it could be queer baiting. And if it is the worst, most cruel queer baiting, because poor Will has been kidnapped, assaulted, possessed, fallen in love with his best friend. And then he's going to risk his life and maybe die and come back, is what I suspect, like Harry Potter. So Mike can have a happy ending with 11, which, by the way, is not a happy ending. I don't know why people are, quote unquote, shipping 11, because they make each other miserable. And they've dated throughout the show, and it's a canon relationship. You ever notice they were separated or broken up almost the entire time? The only time they're together most of the season is season 1, when Mike's first words are, "That's not Will," when he meets 11, and he's going to have her come back to, circle the house, have his mom answer the door, and get her back to the insane asylum or wherever she comes from. He doesn't care until she says she recognizes Will, and he uses her to get Will back. And then he's impressed with her powers. He's a real power sexual, as the kids have been joking. So, if you look and you pay attention, that relationship is so unhealthy. And I don't hate 11. Again, degree in women's studies. I want 11 to have a happy, independent life where people aren't using her for her powers, or maybe she even loses them and can live a totally normal life. I want her to go off with Callie, travel the world, go to college, whatever, find herself. That's what her arc has been. So actually, again, as a writer, the only way to truly and satisfyingly close the arcs of Will, Mike, and Elle are for Mike and Will to both accept their sexuality, which Will already has, and for them to realize they're in love with each other and be together, and for Elle to be independent. Anything else is a weird queer baiting, it's a failure. I think the Duffer Brothers can land the plane because they've done such a good job in seeding the story the whole time. And for the people that are saying, well, there's only a few episodes left, there's no time for them to have a whole romantic arc. Plenty of people have had a romantic arc in less time. There's 5.5 hours left. They have been young teenagers, so doing it earlier would have, been weird because, again, they need to process. They don't have gay role models. There were no out actors. The first out actor I can recall knowing about was Rupert Everett, and I think it was around the time My Best Friend's Wedding came out. So that's, I think, in the early, 93, 91, something like that. I'm not looking it up right now. But that wasn't a thing. They had no one to look up to. And so it was so important for Will to meet Robin, because that gave him a model of a happy gay couple, a happy same-sex couple. He's never seen that. He's never seen that on television. The gay character is always this minor character that's like a fashion designer, or more like an interior designer, or flower arranger, or something very stereotypical, and they're a side character, or one line joke or something like that. There weren't gay leads, there weren't gay shows, there was nothing. There was no. That's why Will, I think it's season 3, when everyone else is getting together, maybe it's season 2. And Joy says, "Oh, you won't think it's so gross when you fall in love." And he says, "I'll never fall in love." You poor precious boy. He doesn't know that's a possibility for him, because there's no model for it. So the thing that has really struck me about this show is that, it was absolutely meant to work both ways. That's why I keep raving about the writing and Finn Wolfhard's performance, because it was hiding in plain sight. You were meant to be tricked. And again, for people that think, oh, there's not enough time to wrap up this arc or have a whole gay arc, it's super easy. And I can tell you 2 really common examples where it was done famously and successfully. The most, I think, famous example is The Sixth Sense. Spoiler alert, Bruce Willis was dead the whole time. But by re-showing a montage from his perspective and showing things that he was shutting out, denying, it showed that he was gay and he was fitting all the things that the boy Cole told him. And they even have Cole's voiceover. And so you can do something identical to what was done with Will. When Will sees his movie, we can see Mike's movie, or have Vecna torture Mike. And you might even think it's, he's making comments to shame Will for being gay. But then when we get around to the front of the person, it's actually Mike that he's tormenting, right? I think there's several, so there's several ways that we can get into Mike's head. And there's a reason we haven't been in Mike's head before, because it would have spoiled the whole game. We were meant to find out Will was gay first and have him go through his arc of self-acceptance. And look, even when you're straight, and especially when you're a teenager where your body's crazy and your hormones are wild and you're insecure suddenly, and you might have acne, a lot's going on. You're not, you're not as confident in flirting or recognizing if someone is interested in you. And it happens that 2 people, are interested in each other, and they don't realize the other one does, and they think it's not possible. So you add them being 2 boys, and it's going to just multiply that. So I think that, God bless them, they got to land this plane. It's an important story. It's not just, the LGBTQ youth and adults need it. But you know what? Clearly from a lot of the commentary, the straights need it. I have compared it to putting the dog's medicine in a piece of cheese or one of those little treats with a pocket. We need this medicine right now, because we were making progress and we were doing so well. And the last couple of years, a lot of that progress has been reversed through this red pill, all the pipelines to the red pill community, the sort of return to, it's not even a return to the conservatism of the 80s and the 50s, which we see in the show. The 80s were just like a redux of the 50s. In fact, a 50s actor was the president of the United States somehow. And now a 2000s game show host is the president of the United States somehow. We're doing better. More people were welcome at the table. More people were part of the party. not a coincidence that the party in the show, one character is made fun of for his disabilities, one for being black, and then it goes on to have an interracial relationship. Another couple, they're crossing the class line, the Nancy and Will's brother Jonathan. They're coming from totally different classes. And then the two nuclear, outwardly successful families are Mike's family, where they don't communicate and they stuff down their emotions, and the mom is drinking all the time, and the dad just kind of makes snide remarks to everybody. And the Turnbow family, who are quite rich, they're like real estate developers, and they're pretty dysfunctional, and the mom's always taking Valium. So there's just so much commentary and so much subtext that isn't even that sub, and people are somehow missing it. Every child left behind left a lot of children behind. There are so many people that are just missing even things that to me are obvious when I'm half watching, and definitely bringing my educational background and my writing background into it. Obviously, I see more, but even when I'm just lazily watching, I definitely could, detected some of the class issues and the political issues, and just the fact that it's the 80s should make that apparent, right? Even, again, nothing's there by accident. The Wheelers have a Reagan-Bush, sign in their yard in the second season, because it's 1984. So I just hope that the Duffers will land this plane. I have faith in them based on the great work that they and the cast and the crew, like the costumes, like everyone has done such fantastic work of seeding that. And I'm going to be so bold as to say, I don't even care about the upside down anymore. I think the entire point is Byler. I think they basically put a gay love story in Star Wars so that you could see it and empathize. Not so filled a woke agenda, but that you could love these characters and identify with them and think they're great and heroic. And at the end of this series, what I hope is that you not only see two gay boys save the world, but their love saves the world, because it's love that connects Will to his powers. It's love that helped him save first, and not for nothing, but Mike was first, and Robin and Caleb. So, this is a story that's, about love conquering all. There might be like a true love's kiss where one is injured or possessed or something like that. Probably possessed, because that's a thing that's happened, or somehow in thrall. And guess what? Mike has a history of being able to pull Will out of when he's like trances and having episodes in the year that he was in the second season, where he was possessed by the Mind Flayer. So I think there's going to be something like that. And, I think that even as someone that long considered myself an ally and open-minded, I learned so much just because my eyes were opened by those scenes where Mike is just looking at Will and heavily breathing and like he's in awe and in love. And it's a very common trope. And by the way, I want to mention a couple tropes that, show that it's a love story. One that a lot of people have mentioned is the Cyrano trope. This is how common the Cyrano trope is, where one person is talking through the other, and they're thinking that someone, the more attractive person, is doing the actual speaking, but it's actually, it's Cyrano de Bergerac. He has a big nose, but there have been so many versions. But I'll tell you how common this is. Two versions that I've seen, just off the top of my head. One, Sierra Burgess, starring the actress who played Barb. Isn't that a coincidence? You want to know another funny coincidence? In the 90s, there was one called The Truth About Cats and Dogs. I saw it in the theater, starring guess who? Uma Thurman, mother of Maya Hawke, who plays Robin, who mentored Will into his gayness. So the fact that it's such a deep cut of how these tropes are meant to point you to that. And in fact, so many movies are rewrites, right, of Romeo and Juliet is another common one. And people have been pointing to Romeo and Juliet because there's the pizza oven in episode 4 where Elle is in the freezer using as a sensory deprivation tank is Montague, which is Romeo's last name. That doesn't bode well. Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy of star-crossed lovers. Star-crossed doesn't mean they're fated. It means that the fates are against them. The stars are crossed. It's going to end in tragedy. Romeo and Juliet both killed themselves over each other. I can't even remember the order. I think Romeo thinks she's dead, so he takes poison, and then she stabs herself. And I only know that from my favorite movies, Harold and Maude, and there's an actress who recreates that scene at the end. Anyway, so there's a reason that we see this. There's a reason that they write parallels between the other canon couples and Will and Mike. There's a reason the yellow and blue meet in the West. Guess what? When yellow and blue met in the West, that's when they started realizing their feelings. I think Mike started at the end of season 3 when Will moved and Elle kissed him, and he looked so confused in front of Will's closet. And Will obviously figured it out in between and makes that painting, and he's literally bouncing in the airport scene. And then when Mike thinks that painting is for a girl because Elle has said that in a letter. And so he's really super weird. All of a sudden he can't hug Will. And this made me think of something that I dated a guy from high school about 15 years ago. So we were in our 40s. We just realized we were living near each other and we got to talking, and I didn't really want to date him. He just kind of, forced the issue, and I felt guilty and whatever. So, but one thing I remember him telling me is what it's like to be a teenage boy in, like 7th, 8th, 9th grade. There's constant fear of getting an erection. Even when you're not excited about someone just because your body's changing, there's a lot of hormones rushing through your body, let alone when you're attracted to someone, right? And that's just constant, worry. Kind of like the equivalent for girls would be like having an accident when you're on your period. I don't know how many times that girls would be like, okay, I'm going to walk and can you check the back of my pants and see if there's anything on it. That happened like on a daily basis in junior high because someone's always on their period. So, and I hadn't thought of that, right? Because I'm not a girl, don't get visible erections. And most I might blush and someone knows that I am attracted to them or embarrassed or whatever. So I thought of that a lot with that when I rewatched that airport scene of Mike can't hug Will because he's got all these feels that he didn't have before because now he's gone through puberty. In that gap between the 2 seasons, they've both grown and they're muscular. They've gone through, puberty. And so, that's really different, than being 12 or 13 and having a crush on someone, because now your body is having all these feelings that even if you're straight are a lot to deal with emotionally and process. But certainly if you're gay and it's in the 80s, it's a lot. So I want Bylers to have faith, and I want everyone else to have an open mind because, again, with a women's studies background, I don't hate Elle. I want Elle to be happy, but I think her arc is to be independent. I want Will to get into NYU because that's where he's wanted to go since he was 6 years old. A little detail I caught on rewatching. And I hope not too many people die. I know people think Steve's going to die. I mean, I probably wouldn't be too upset. I'm actually going to try and do a separate video about what I need to happen. But, it's not, again, about sex for me. In fact, since they're teenagers, I really don't particularly want them to have sex. Although I don't watch Euphoria, but don't they have sex on there and they're in high school? Like, it's a thing that happens. Gilmore Girls? No, she was in college. Anyway, I think I did meander. I think another example that I did want to use of being able to tell a story and do a switch effectively in a short amount of time. The other example I think of besides The Sixth Sense is Snape, because the whole time, there are people doubting Snape. And, Remus is like, well, it comes down to if you trust Dumbledore, and Dumbledore trusts Snape. So I trust Snape. And then when Harry gets his memories, he finds out this whole time that Snape was a double agent, but his primary loyalty was to Dumbledore, not to Voldemort. And Voldemort, again, like many villains and like Vecna, obviously they don't value love or loyalty or kindness, just power. And if you think power is the only thing and the ultimate thing, and money, then a lot of people will indeed fall in line for money and power. But some of us, we have to like the person we see in the mirror, so we have to do the right thing and not hurt people, and we want the best for the people we love, and really for everyone in general, right? So I think that's a very common trope, again, for villains, is to underestimate the power of love, which, by the way, Back to the Future tie-in, they've all kind of worn that. Will wore disappeared in that vest from Back to the Future, very similar one. And Mike has like a denim one. I think that was part of Michael J. Fox's outfit. All I know is I had a very similar vest in the 80s that was like acid wash blue with acid wash black parts of it. So, again, the details are incredible. So I know that my ADHD, I do meander and I go all sorts of different places, but I think this is just so beautifully done. I just want them to land this plane, and I want those boys to have a beautiful romantic kiss with a swelling music, fires in the background, and the corpses of their vanquished enemies, like any other couple would in a similar story. I'm not turned on by it. I just want them to have the same joy, the same love, the same happy ending that they would get if Will was a girl or if Mike was a girl. I know a lot of people keep saying, well, if Will was a girl, you would notice this and that. But also, what if Mike was a girl? Because again, Mike is more queer-coded from the very start. It's far more, when you rewatch, it's just everywhere. I feel dumb that I didn't notice it before, but I was probably always watching it distracted. I'm always multitasking, checking email, designing a website, doing things while I watch TV. So I think that's how I missed a lot of the subtext and the eye contact and the music and the lighting that, the warm lighting between the two of them. Literally, they're the lights of each other's lives, Do you ever, that expression of, your face lights up when you see the person that you love. Your face just lights up, and it's true. It's a thing that happens, and it's a thing that they're doing. So I hope that you'll keep an open mind. I hope the Bylers will keep the faith, and I hope the Duffers land the plane